What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the H Panel, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Diana Katsikaris. Diana is a fitness instructor, an educator, and the author of the book Yes You Can, which is a book based on her personal experiences and her personal perspective around the world of OCD and anxiety. Diana was so fun to talk to, and I want to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, before we get started here, guys, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on a podcast platform, share with someone who might need to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. Now, before I let you guys go, the H Panel has a new sponsor. They are called Your MD. And before we get into the episode today, I'm going to talk to one of the founders, Sean Kanungo, to talk a little more about the company. I'm very excited to show you guys this episode, and I hope you all enjoy. I'll talk to you very soon. Peace. So before we get into our conversation with Diana, I have Sean Kanungo from Your MD on the line with me. Sean, what's going on, man?
Harry, well, listen, I'm really excited, and I want to congratulate you, by the way. You know, the podcast rankings are out, and you are killing it.
Thank you, man. Yes, thank you. Pumped to see that.
It's fantastic to see, and I'm really excited about this episode with Diana. What are you most excited about with this episode?
Man, I just really want to show the guests or the viewers, like Diana just has so much energy and so much positivity to her. You know, she's a fitness instructor. She's the author of the book, Yes You Can. She's just such an inspiration for younger girls looking up to, leaders. She promotes mental well-being. She posts fitness instruction videos online for all these kids who are kind of sitting at home, locked in the house, all antsy, you know what I mean? So she's a really big ray of sunshine, and I can't wait for people to listen to her.
Well, I'm excited as well, and I'm excited to just get some like fitness tips from her, because I don't know about you, but my dad bod, it's incrementally growing every single day. I got 2 kids, so it keeps on growing, and I'm excited to hear from her. And by the way, guys, I'm from a digital health startup here in Canada called yourmd.ca. We're connecting Canadians to amazing physicians across the country. And what we're doing is helping people with, for example, things like hair loss. So if you're dealing with hair loss issues, or think you're losing your hair, or thinking your hair is thinning, we connect you with amazing physicians that can help you, whether it's looking for medication or whatnot. It doesn't matter. What does matter is check out yourmd.ca and check out Diana. She's going to drop some amazing knowledge bombs. And Harry, let's get into the pod.
Let's do it, man. Hope you all enjoy. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel. And we are live. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So before we get too into anything, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. So what got you inspired to become the mindset motivator?
Yes. So I am somebody who I've always loved group fitness. I've always loved sports. I've always loved kind of being a part of a community. And after going through my own dealings with mental illness and then deciding to become more open about kind of my struggles, that's kind of what turned me into wanting to be somebody that openly shared what I had been through, but also uses more of like fitness and then my background in education as an outlet too.
Mm-hmm. You said off camera, you're a teacher as well?
Yes.
How do you have the energy? Where do you find it?
So my students make fun of me because they see me at Dunkin' Donuts all the time. A few of them work at Dunkin', and they have recently revealed to a few of my classes that they've seen me go through the drive-thru more than once a day. So I am definitely fueled by a lot of coffee, and I personally am just so lucky in that I love what I do and I love the students, and I just think the energy amongst the students and then amongst my clients at the various fitness facilities that I work at are just so great. And I think the energy you bring is more important than the energy you get out of situations. So I think it's all mindset, and sometimes even being tired and just faking it, but then it turns into being more of just real, if that that makes sense.
Yeah, fake it till you make it, right? I'm
Mhm.
sure you can relate to this, but I'm a camp counselor usually when the pandemic's not happening. So even when I'm tired, you got to be on because you're like
Yeah,
in charge of 25 little 8-year-olds. Um,
totally.
and I would be that guy who would like for like opening ceremonies and stuff, I'd be in the middle like screaming and dancing, and people are like, how do you have the energy? I'm like, when I go home, I don't talk to people. Like all my
Oh,
energy is
me
there.
either. Totally. 100%. I know, it's so funny. I'll be like getting ready and I have a coffee currently and I'll be like literally chugging coffee and I'm like, all right, showtime. Like, all right, squad, what's up? Like all this stuff. And then I go home and I literally plopped on my couch, put my headphones in, and half the time there's like nothing even playing. I just don't want anyone in my family talking to me.
Amazing. I
But yeah.
this one time last was it last no it was 2 summers ago, man. My concept, like my time concept, is just gone from this pandemic. Like
Oh, for sure.
I still think last year was 2019,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so in 2019 there was one weekend where all the counselors had a big party the Friday night,
Hmm.
and I got obliterated. And then the next morning I commuted to downtown Toronto,
Hmm.
to go to Carabana, which is like a big festival down here, and did that all that day. So it was just a big parade, people dancing. I was so sunburnt, and then I I commuted back home. So I live about 40 minutes out of Toronto. I commuted back home, and when I got there, I was supposed to go to Veld, which is like a big EDM festival, the next day. And I was supposed to leave at 7 a.m. and I got home at 10:30. And I remember I was looking for my pass for the festival, and I was
Hmm.
like, "Where is my pass?" Because I couldn't find it, and it was in the car that my brother had taken to London
Oh
to party with.
no.
And London from my house is about 2.5 hours. So
Okay.
I was like,
Yeah.
"Can you meet me halfway, man? Like, because that's a long drive." And he's like, "I'm already drunk, so I can't."
Yeah.
So
Oh
I
my gosh.
so I had to commute from my house to London and back at 10:30 p.m. I got home at like 4:30 or 5, and then I had to leave at 7, and I went to Veld all day. Just it was too much. It was too much. But then I remember on Monday I had this huge rush of energy because I was so tired, and I went
Yeah.
all out on opening ceremonies. I was screaming, I was dancing with the kids, and I remember about at lunchtime just just crashed. That was the
Oh yeah.
worst.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. It's a tricky situation. But yeah, energy always, I feel like it's always there. You just gotta dig deep for it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about your personal experiences with like
Mhm.
OCD and anxiety, because I know you wrote a book about it.
Yes.
So what inspired your book? Yes, you can.
Yes. So I had always wanted to write a book mainly because I was diagnosed with PANDAS when I was 11 years old. So PANDAS is pediatric autoimmune neurological disorder associated with strep. So basically, I had strep so many times. I ended up getting the swine flu and then strep, and it triggered all these symptoms that align with a handful of mental illnesses. So with PANDAS, the 6 symptoms are anxious tics, anxiety, OCD, anorexia, depression, and panic attacks. And I went from someone that had always been a shy and anxious kid to someone that could not function in the real world because I had all 6 of those symptoms almost like overnight. So I went through the process of seeing different therapists and I had all these book recommendations. And while they were all coming from the right place, it was all like more like textbooks or big like how to overcome OCD 101 written by like a medical professional. I don't actually know if that's the title of a book. I just can't remember. I just know I had a handful of books that were given to me and I was just kind of like, I don't like, I'm 11 years old. I can't comprehend any of this. Going to even further into middle school and high school, I still was like, I like, it's weird that there's nothing out there about like specifically like PANDAS and OCD and like personal stories. So then during the lockdown in March, right when it happened, I was like, okay, I think this is my time, because school was closed and the studios were closed. So I was like, okay, I need something to come out of this. And then April rolls around and I was like, okay, I still haven't like really made any moves. I'd been writing, but then stopped writing, then stopped. And then um I like, this is such a me thing that everyone's always like, this is always how these things happen, where I just get myself into these things where I found the person that designed the cover of my book. I searched her on Instagram, found her, did a ton of research. She was the one that I was like, okay, I'm so into her graphic designs. She's local New England based from Maine. And basically messaged her on Instagram that night and was like, so I have a book written, I want to publish it. Here's like what I want. And can you design the cover for me? She was like, yeah, sure. Like, how many pages are it? And I was like, oh, I'll get back to you really soon. She's like, okay, I need to know in like a few days. So just give me a few days. And so then I was like, oh my God, I haven't written a book. I lied to her. So I basically, I didn't like lie, but I knew that if I like told somebody and like committed to it, and like then she was like telling me the pricing and I was like, you know what, sure. So I literally just Venmoed her the price, and then I was like, okay, I just paid for a book cover and I don't even have a book, and I told her that I did. So I like sat down and for like 48 hours wrote the book, and then I told her how many pages it was, and then it was just a ton of editing. So it was basically like, I wanted something to come out of the pandemic. I wanted there to be something helpful, and I also wanted there to be a resource that people could look at and realize like, okay, she might have a degree in psychology, but I'm not a like medical professional, and it's really my own story. It's not like research and case studies that I've conducted myself. It's just like my raw truth. So that is how the book came out.
Man, 48 hours straight?
Yes, I just really
How do you
cranked it
sit
out.
down and do that?
I really cranked it out, sat down, drank a ton of coffee, and just like powered through.
Also, I didn't realize that the amount of pages mattered for a title.
Yes, for her to get the specs for like the binding of the book, she needed to know how many pages to know how much like width and the spacing. I didn't realize either until she was asking for all this info, and I was like, oh, yeah. As you're messaging me, I'm Googling everything you're saying, so I have no idea what you're talking about, but learning along the way. But no, I definitely think part of like with my, especially my OCD, is when I get very like focused on something, good or bad, and I've made myself more aware of when it's bad to shift it more good. That's like the only thing I will focus on and obsess with. So that's kind of how I was able to like sit down and just write, because that's the only thing my brain was thinking about.
Mm. So, and when you're in these moments where your OCD, you can tell that it's going to become focused on a negative thing, how do you snap out of it?
I think one of my biggest things that I found is like taking a step back. And that sounds so easy and simple, but I think one of the things I realize is I'm always someone that wants kind of like the instant gratification, that like jumps in and almost tries to like problem solve right away. And am like finding that as I've like gotten older, usually in the past I would try to like distract myself right away, find something else to do, and then it would just either come back later or I would be distracted doing something else and I would be absolutely miserable. So I think almost like taking a step back and saying like, you know, I recognize like these thoughts are there, it's not a part of me but just something that's going on. Everybody has thoughts. Taking a second to just like almost like just let everything be and recognize like stillness and space, and then not ignoring what's going on in your brain, but just saying like, you know what, I recognize it's there, I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not acting upon it or validating it, and then just keep moving from there. So it's almost like taking a breath and then regrouping and then proceeding from there.
Hmm. It's funny because when you tell people who are struggling, they're like, "How do I get out of this funk?" And you say, "Take a step back." They go, "Man," like they just roll their eyes. They're like, "It's not that
Right.
easy." It's like, well,
Totally.
it's not easy, but taking a step back is actually a lot harder than you think it is.
100%. 100%. I know I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day who they're like, I feel like it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I'm like, look, but the important part is not the 2 steps forward. Like, that's great, you're making progress, but it's the step back that's like, all right, you have another opportunity to go back and work on something to then get even further. If we didn't have the steps back and we just kept going further, then we would just be wandering through life and not like really growing from anything. The step back is important because you're then able to like work on yourself a little bit more, even though in the moment it absolutely stinks and it is so difficult. And it probably took me like a decade to actually realize it. So
That's a great point. And
yeah.
this might be a terrible comparison, but it's almost like when you're in a relationship and you guys don't argue and you just think it's perfect, and then eventually it just crashes and you're like, I thought we were perfect.
100%. No, that's a really good analogy. Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. If honestly, if things seem too perfect, there's something wrong.
Yeah, that's
I'm always, yeah.
no, you go.
Oh, I'm always like embrace the crazy, embrace like the chaos, because if it's chaotic, it means like there's something good coming. If it's like kind of like, okay, this seems like really perfect, then that's like what's going on.
Yeah, I don't really trust people who, like, not that are perfect, but that have never had to take a step back. It's
Yeah.
like it's just weird to me. I'm like, you've never had anything go wrong. Anything.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
And they're not very funny, those people. They don't have personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm always like, you'd rather be crazy than boring. So yeah.
That's true.
Would love to change the connotation of the word crazy, because I feel like it's always like seemingly like, oh, that's a bad thing. I'm like, no, it's actually not.
Yeah, there's like a negative blanket around that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you released your book, what was the reception like? Like, are there a lot of, because I've never heard of pandas before. Are there a lot of people out there experiencing this?
So what's really interesting is when I first released the book, I didn't know anybody other than one person that was experiencing and had experienced pandas to the same like level that I did. And then right after I like did like a little post on my Instagram about like what pandas is, I got a ton of responses saying like, oh, like I know about this, I just didn't realize that's what this was called. Or messages like, oh, I have this, like, thank you for sharing, because it's a disorder that like it's tricky, because for a while, especially when I was like first experiencing symptoms in the medical field, it just wasn't something that was talked about or diagnosed because people didn't believe that it was possible. But now there's a lot more research on it, and there is more of a like recognition of this like more chronic illness. But there's still, it's almost like the way it's viewed is like the same idea where like there's some people that believe that like vaccines can give children autism. It's like the same thing, like strep and of severe like flu-like illness can give people like all these disorders. Like it's the same like viewed, it's very skewed. There's very extremes to it. There's no like real middle ground that's been found yet.
Yeah,
Yet being the key word.
that's right. Yeah, keyword there. I also love what you said about how, like, you're not like a medical professional, but you still wrote the book, because it's one thing to be a professional. We need those people, of course, but it's also another
Totally.
thing to have gone through it and like to share
Yeah.
your story, because it's almost, I don't I don't want to bash on medical people because that's not what I'm doing, but it's almost more relatable to a lot of people. Because, like,
100%.
yeah, like when I was trying to figure out my depression, the only thing I had, because people never opened up, the only thing I had was like books and doctors and
Totally.
therapists. And it's like, that's great, and I'm glad it's a real thing, but I don't know anyone else that's opened up about this. So it's important to
Totally.
know that.
100% for sure. And especially being a PE and health teacher at the high school level, I know I've heard from a lot of different students and even just younger clients through the fitness studio is it's just so important to know that people to know people that experience the same thing, so you know you're not alone. Because as much as I love my therapists and psychiatrists, they have not experienced OCD, depression, pandas, eating disorders. They just have studied it and are experts on the subjects, but they don't have personal experience other than like patient stories. So that's why I think it's both sides are so important, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I remember when I was starting this channel up, my family was worried about me doing it because they were like, "You're not a professional though." And it's like, well, I'm not giving advice. I'm just saying this is what worked for me, and I go through this too.
Yes.
Yeah, we need more people like that.
Totally. I know, I'm all about the I statements. I've been there, I do this, and then I'm like, it's not advice. I'm just talking about myself and sharing like what has gone on and what's helped for me. Totally. Totally. I know there's definitely been like viewpoints at times where I've heard from like not family but more friends, like, you shouldn't do that, like what if like talking about this like prevents you getting a job in the future, like what if people think like you're weird. And I'm kind of like, well, they can think I'm weird, but if it helps a few people, then I think that's good.
Man, I've gotten the same comments, and I'm like, I wouldn't even want to be employed there anyway. If that's holding them
Right.
back from hiring me, that's stupid.
Yeah. I'm also like, that's also a sign that like uncomfortable conversations need to happen, because if we're like so afraid to talk about it, it means like it needs to be included in our space and in what we're talking about, and also like educating students on. I'm like, I'm not that old, and I love the school system that I work in. I love the school system that I attended, but it just wasn't even a part of like any of the curriculum talking about mental health and involving it with younger generations. And I think that's also so important too.
How old are you?
I'm 23.
By the time this comes out, I'll be 23 too.
I love it. I love it. That's all.
So exactly, I completely feel you, because like even the first time I heard the word depression was when I got diagnosed in first year university. I was like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah.
It's important because I was labeled a hothead forever. Like they just kind of brushed
Mhm.
me off. They're like, this guy's nuts. And I was like, what's wrong with me? But it's like
I know.
there's something that is like not curable, but you can figure out how to live with it if you just get the
Yeah.
proper help.
100%. It can be managed totally. Totally.
Yeah, it's important to teach kids that, because especially like I'm starting to see a shift now. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's really nice to see the shift going on. Um, like more people are talking about it. More schools have people coming in to talk about it. Like I never had that, and it's nice for kids to look and be like, okay, so I'm not the only person.
Totally. For sure. And also nice to have like kids and other people realize that like even though it is challenging, each day brings its own like level of difficulty, like we can still live like fulfilling lives too, even though some days are more challenging than others. But never a dull moment is always a good thing too.
Yeah,
For sure.
I always have. It's like my brain is a sitcom show every day. That's how I feel most days. Like there's always something going on up there.
Totally. Totally. Totally.
I oh, what was my point first? I was gonna say something. Mm, oh yeah, like it's just crazy looking back, because like I remember people who would open up, because I knew a couple kids in high school who like had it pretty bad.
Hmm.
Like some people had like schizophrenia, PTSD, like um, and I remember they would have like moments of like
Hmm.
outbursts or just really low points, and look, the kids would just look and be like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And just be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, he's weird. Don't talk to him."
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I know. I think there was definitely times when I was younger that I opened up more about like what I was experiencing. And it was definitely taken with like a level of discomfort and a little bit of negativity from my peers as well. And I think that like one of my biggest message to people is if someone is reacting to your story in a either negative or uncomfortable way, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with something they're experiencing and something that is going on with their own story that they're either not ready to share, don't want to talk about it, or even like a level of jealous that you're at the point where you can talk about it where they might not be yet. So I'm such a believer in like behaviors communication and always like for like advocate, share. And if you don't get the response that you want in the end, as though although it's taken me years and it's so much easier said than done, their response has nothing to do with like your output. So it's definitely it's definitely like a weird balance between how much you want to put yourself out there versus like what you'll get in response to it, for sure.
Yeah, that actually is a great segue because I wanted to talk about a couple blog posts that you've made. And the first one is your one that's titled Why You Gotta Be So Rude.
Yes.
Shout out to Magic. Um, so there's no denying, obviously, that a lot of people out there are nasty towards people who open up and people who are struggling mentally, like we just talked about. And in turn, that kind of causes people to like not want to open up and kind of makes them beat themselves up in their own head, and makes them feel different, makes them feel isolated. So how how are you able to kind of shut these comments down? You've kind of mentioned it already, but like let's say as a kid, how were you able to receive that criticism and kind of shrug it off?
As a kid, I couldn't. I would hear one little comment and I would crumble to pieces and I wouldn't go to school for days. I wouldn't show up to anything. I would not answer any text messages. I would just completely close myself off and just would have this feeling of like, I'm so worthless. Like me being open is actually causing me more harm. So as a kid, I could not handle it at all. Um, After learning more like about myself and also like recognizing and realizing, I think sometimes like really challenging experiences help us realize like what we want and what we don't want. And I think that from having people either be rude or say like not super kind things, or also like use my like OCD anxiety against me, almost like gaslighting, where they're like, well, I think that's actually this happening. And like in a meaningfully nice way, like I totally respect that when people are like, Diana, like you're on an OCD tangent right now. Like you need to take a step back. I totally respect that. But if I'm like feeling super uncomfortable about like something someone's doing to me, and then they're like, well, it's actually your OCD thinking that. Like, I didn't do any of that. And it's almost like they're trying to like twist, like almost like brain trick me. I'm kind of like, that's not cool. Like, what? Um, so I think now kind of my biggest thing is like, okay, what energy will it give me to respond to this? Like if I get like a mean comment or a negative rating on my book, or somebody says something like unkind, I'm kind of like, do I want to take and maybe even waste energy responding to it? Or do I want to think, you know what? I'm happy with what I put out there. What I put out there is meaningful to me. It's not worth my time or energy to respond to this. I've seen it happen multiple times, unfortunately, on like social media, like platforms where people get something that's a negative review or just something negative, and their outlet is like to post like a long Instagram story about it. And it's just kind of like, where does that leave you in the end? Like, what energy does it take? Like, I'm someone that I'm not big into confrontation because I'm kind of like, all right, if someone's doing something mean to me, do I really want to send them a message, to have a phone call, to talk about our feelings and how, not that there's anything wrong with talking about your feelings, but or like just talk about like why they did something that hurt my feelings? I'm kind of like, okay, if the energy that I'm going to put into it is not going to make me feel better, then why bother? If I was the one that pressed submit on a blog post and liked it when I posted it. That being said, I'm always open to hear different perspectives because I think that's super important. I constantly have students as well as clients give me like feedback and critiques because I think that's the only way that like we grow. But I think if there's someone that is being nasty towards you because you're being open about sharing about a mental illness or a personal story, then sometimes the best thing to do is just not do anything, because where is it going to get you?
Yeah, that's why you need like a group of friends, like close people, even family that you just trust to give like, because you always need constructive criticism. Like I always encourage that. If I've got a bunch of yes men in my group, I want them out. Like when people are like, "That's so awesome," it's like, no. Tell me what I can fix, though. I don't need you to praise me like I'm some god. I want to know what I can do better. But like with social media, the problem now is like, you've got all of these people behind a screen where there's no repercussions, so they just unleash. They're nasty.
Yeah.
Some of the comments I've gotten on like YouTube, I just gotta laugh. Like there's nothing else to do. I'm like,
100%.
yeah, like,
I'm like,
no,
the
you go.
way sometimes like people are trolling, I'm like, you really typed that out, press send after it went through your head?
I was just gonna say that. The part that kills me is like they'll send a huge paragraph in all caps, and I'm like, listen, the funny part about this, and when I was like a couple years ago, it would have bothered me to the point where I wouldn't want to do anything. But now I look at it, I'm like, this person really sat down, took time out of their day to type this paragraph in all caps and send it. Like it's so funny. It's like,
Oh, for sure. Well, and then I'm also think like, where are you now? Like, what did you accomplish in that time? And then there's also like a part of me too that's like, oh my God, we made it. We have haters.
yes.
I don't know.
When I get a dislike, I'm like, yes, I made it.
Right. Yeah, totally. No, it's definitely, I would say anyone out there that is wanting to create content or wanting to share their story and is fearful to do it, and to also take what people comment with a grain of salt, and just realize that sometimes it's not even worth responding to the comment.
Yeah. Like, well, here's the thing, right? Is like one person can hate what you're doing and take energy out of their day hating you for it. There's 8 billion people. And I know
Exactly.
not everyone's got a phone or social media, of course, but there's, okay, let's say like 5 billion people on the internet. There's gonna be someone that appreciates it.
Totally. Yeah. And one of my biggest things, so I think that I found like ending 2020 going into 2021 is like the idea of like, if someone makes you feel badly, it's not that you're worth less, it means that you're worth more of what they're giving to you or not giving to you. So it's almost like flipping the switch of like, no, I'm not worth less than this, like I'm worth more than what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Could you imagine, like, because I know we grew up at the birth of social media, but could you imagine being like in elementary school or like grade 9 and 10 with like the social media that's out now?
No, I constantly tell my kids, I'm like, you are all so resilient, because I was a mess in high school, not even a hot mess, but a mess in high school. And there wasn't a pandemic happening. And like Snapchat was just becoming a thing, Instagram was just becoming a thing. And I'm like, I don't know how you all do it. I'm very impressed, because I don't, like, if I was born 10 years earlier, I would be screwed.
I like like I was self-conscious before all these models and like successful people posted pictures. I'd be screwed too. I would be a hot mess.
Yeah, I know. I think my first Instagram post, I was like 13. It was like a picture of the beach. I was like, great beach day. Like, and it just felt like a way to like share photos. And then I remember like not even realizing other people could see it. I thought it was just a place to like store photos. Like, I literally thought Instagram was a place to just take pictures and store them on a grid. And then I had a friend say like, oh my gosh, I saw that beach photo you posted. And I was like, where? They're like, on Instagram. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean you saw it on Instagram? I just was putting my photos in like a nice grid from my trip. And they're like, no, you publish that, like people can publicly see it. And I was like, oh, I thought it was just like an app to store your photo.
I know. No, my first picture was me in a cowboy hat, and I posted a mirror selfie, and I said "Yeehaw." That was my first picture. I was like,
Oh, I love it. Love it.
"It was brutal." And then now you've got like TikTok.
Oh yeah,
First of all, I'm low key addicted, and
I'm addicted.
I don't like
Last
admitting
night,
that.
last night I, no joke, was sitting on the couch scrolling, and then I jumped up and I was like, I need to get to bed. What am I doing? I was literally looking at back cracking videos for an hour.
I don't blame you. Those are so good.
They're so good.
You fall down a rabbit hole, and it's so
Yeah.
easy. You don't even realize it. That's why, like, oh, these kids now, like, I hate saying that because I sound so old. I'm only 23. Like, I haven't even experienced anything. But these kids now, like, they're gonna fall down all these rabbit holes and not even know what real life is.
I know. I know. Yeah. It's definitely tricky. I know I teach a portion of my health class on like social media and what it is in terms of like validation and that way it's not validation, and also like being mindful how much time you're spending on there. But then I also like I need to check myself too because I teach all this stuff and then here I am at 11:30 scrolling through TikTok when I have to get up at 4:30, and I just told my kids how important it is to not do this.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm the same way. And especially with the pandemic now, like I didn't realize screen time on your iPhone was a thing. And then so like 3 months into the pandemic, I was like, why do I feel like hot garbage? And then I looked at it and it was like, yeah, you're spending an hour and a half on TikTok, an hour and a half on Instagram, an hour and a half on Twitter. I'm like, oh my God, my day's gone.
I know. Every Sunday at 8:15, my watch, I'm in the middle of teaching a fitness class, my watch goes off and it shares like my screen time for the week. And I always am either like, yes, in the middle of teaching, like it was down a percentage this week, or I'm like, oh no. And everyone's always like, like you're in the middle of teaching class. Why are you saying yes or no? I'm like, oh, don't worry. Just monitoring my screen time.
Ugh, it's so bad. Um, yeah. So anyone listening, like, yo, watch your screen time. Seriously, it's a wake up call.
It is.
And
It
it helps.
is.
It helps when you're off your phone. It feels like free. It feels like freedom almost, which is kind of brutal because everyone's got their phone all the time. You're kind of trapped in it.
For sure. No, I think the biggest like balance between just like traditional mental health right now is recognizing and setting like alarms in small bits of time where you're on social media, or like even just monitoring in a very loose way, like when you're online, how much time you're spending online, and even like trying to build another habit into that. Like I used to just fall asleep like just scrolling or just answering emails lying in bed with the lights out. And then now I'm like, you know what, no, I'm gonna put my phone away, do a little bit of reading, and it just makes me feel so much better. That I think like basic mental health wise, if like people can put their phone away for maybe 20 minutes less than what they do now, it just makes the world of difference. And you find you're so much more productive too. I love social media, love it, but I also like we keep our distance at times too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's important to moderate it. You can go too
totally,
deep in.
totally, totally.
Oh, so another blog post I wanted to talk about was your one titled "Enough."
Yes.
About like struggling with this idea that you're not good enough.
Mhm.
So how do you personally combat like those feelings or even like imposter syndrome? Because I know I struggle with this myself, kind of with this show and my Instagram, not really, but more so like when I was in swimming, and my ex, she's never gonna watch this, but like she could attest to this. But I would have a, because she was on the swim team too. I would have a bad race, and my immediate excuse was just, oh, I wasn't built to be a swimmer. I wasn't born to be a swimmer. I don't belong here. And like I had convinced myself of that over the years, so like I kept combating that imposter syndrome always. So how do you personally, when you get these feelings, how do you kind of deal with them?
Personally, I found that what works best for me is I write about them, and usually like almost like either publish on a blog or like make a TikTok or do something that I just find that like I think that writing things down and then sometimes even like releasing them, even if it doesn't get published, even if you write it down and then rip it up or write it down and just tuck it away, it can be so much more beneficial in terms of like gaining clarity. Any blog post that I've written, it's not only based off of like what I'm either experienced, but it's also like what I'm feeling like in the moment. Like I have another blog post that I'm going to be publishing later today that's like talking about like how sucking less is greater than like sucking more. Like situations right now, especially with like the pandemic, like stink, but how are we able to take them and make them stink less rather than feed into it and make them stink more? And I think like the blog posts about like enough, or even like my blog post about like how like with in the past with like eating disorders, like I found myself like really shying away from things, and now like what I do every single day is I get one pump of caramel swirl, and the first time I did that it was so hard for me. The first 2 weeks I did that, it was so hard for me, and then now it's just regular in my order and I don't even think about it. But I think that one of my biggest things when I go into like that like pit is I like to write about it and either publish on a blog post or save it for another day and just kind of get the thoughts out of my head, because I think writing about it, typing about it if you don't like to write, is also just something that can help gain clarity and also just help you almost like feel like the relief of like, okay, I'm not talking about this with somebody, but I'm still almost like talking it through with myself in a sense. I know I find myself at times like I love like talking to people about different things, but there's definitely times where if I'm going through something and I'm in more of like a heightened like either OCD or anxious or more like depressed state, I don't like talking to anybody because I sometimes don't like the feedback in a sense that I get back. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want you to tell me like push through or like that, like the things where it's like it will be okay, like those types of things. Like yes, it chances are it will be okay, but there's never 100% certainty, so don't tell me it will be okay because there's still a little bit of certainty it won't be okay. um or like there's bigger things to worry about, like don't worry, people have it so much worse than you. Like sometimes I just don't like hearing that even though I know that it is true in a sense. I think I like to write about it and I like to just kind of work through it myself. Sometimes I publish it, sometimes I don't, just because I think it's just a way to clear and like kind of cleanse out whatever's going on in your mind in a sense. Totally.
On that note of people saying people have it so much worse than you, screw that. Man, that I hate that point so much, and that was told to me for years. They're like, because I mention this all the time. Like I grew up lucky. Like my situation is good. I have a great family, great friends, health, all the education. Like I'm fortunate, but I still had struggles mentally. Like it just like I don't know what it like chemical imbalance, and I would be talking to people like, listen, I'm having such a hard time. They're like, how are you having a hard time? Your life
Yeah,
is so great. It's like, you can't pay for that chemical imbalance.
yeah, totally. Totally. No, I think I like to view it as every person is more like an independent event. So there, you can't compare situations. You can't compare people to people. It's impossible.
Yeah. And it's unfair to the people struggling, right? Like it's unfair for you to think I shouldn't open up, so I'm not going to say anything because people have it worse.
100%.
So you're just going to let it boil inside of you?
Totally. I know before I found like my person in terms of my therapist, um, I was told for years, like, you are worried about germs, you're worried about cleanliness, you're worried about a pandemic happening. A pandemic is never going to happen. There are bigger things to worry about. People die of cancer every day. Why are you worried about like going outside? And I was kind of like, well, that's not helping me get over my fear of leaving my house. And meanwhile, we're in a pandemic. It happened. So so I'm kind of like, I totally get that there are worse situations, but I also don't think it's fair to compare because everybody's situation can be the worst or the best. It just is really like, everybody's different. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody's made up differently. So it's not fair or even logical to compare people's timelines and rate their struggles, because I go so like statistics and psychology on it, but it's like, it just doesn't make any logical sense. Yeah. Yes.
I have so many therapy horror stories, but the one that I had was because I went to maybe 6 or 7 different ones before I found the right person. And this one lady, I was talking to her, and she was like, "Tell me what's wrong." This is a side note, but having to repeat what I was saying to each therapist, that was the worst. It's like, don't you have that in your file? Like, you should know by the 6th person. Anyway, that's not relevant. But
no, for sure, I totally feel that. I was like, oh, here again. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, can we just? I want to get deeper than this.
Yeah.
But so this one instance, I was telling her, I was like, I'm experiencing suicidal thoughts. I'm really upset with what's going on in my life. She goes, why? I was like, what do you mean why? She's like, you've got it all, like, just snap out of it. I'm like, you're a therapist.
Yeah. Oh Lord.
You shouldn't talk like that.
Snap out of it.
A therapist. Like,
yeah.
That's great. Thanks, man. I feel better.
Right? So much better. I really appreciate the time and copay for a snap out of it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it was sick. I was really happy. I remember going back to my friends. They're like, "How was it?" I was like, "Oh, great. Yeah, I'm cured."
I've snapped out of it.
Wow, it's like a magic trick.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, on that same note, like another part of that enough blog is you talking about like finding validation. And I know a lot of people, myself included, whenever I say I know a lot of people, I'm talking about myself.
Same.
Yeah, it's like I know a lot of people, most of them me.
All of them are like the little me's in my head. Like,
they're all on my shoulder listening. They're like,
all here.
So they try to find validation through like success or social media or relationships or money. And how do we cut that out and find validation within ourselves? Because I feel like if you're looking for validation outside, it's just going to be a never-ending cycle. Like, no matter what you do, the little achievements, you're never going to be happy.
100% for sure. No, I think that it's definitely a vicious cycle. I think it's so hard to not fall into the trap, especially on social media, of like engagement on like posts, or like, for my case, like book sales, or even just like, if people, like, if I teach a full week of classes and no one like tags me in their Instagram story, it's like some people get offended by that. And I'm just kind of like, you know what? I used to be in that trapped mindset of like needing like almost like that reassurance. It's just like with OCD, like you almost want to stop the reassurance. Like, I used to absolutely hate my mother, obviously, and of course not for any reason other than the fact that she would say, when I was having any sort of like OCD like outbursts or experience, she would be like, I am not going to feed into telling you certain things about either like what you did do, what you didn't do, or even give you reassurance about like if what you ate in a day is okay, because that's literally not feeding into you. It's literally feeding what the OCD wants. So then it goes right back into the same exact cycle. So she was like, I'm not going to repeat that cyclical pattern. And me being 17 was like, I hate you. Which obviously, and of course, my mom and I are actually like best friends. And I always like tell people, like, even in any teenage years, like if you're going through something and you really hate your parents, that means your parents are doing a really good job, because it means that they are caring and pushing against whatever you're going through. That being said, though, I think what I've like come to realize is I used to be someone that I was such a like almost people pleaser in a sense where I never wanted to disappoint anybody. I always wanted to make sure that like I was on like top of my game, spread myself out so super thin, and was just constantly getting like beat down because I felt like I was trying to do all these things to like get validation and also feel like I was like successful and doing the things in terms of like making money, feeling like I was on the right track. But I think like what changed is realizing that in a sense, as unique individuals, we're all irreplaceable. Like there's always going to be like someone in your life that you can't be replaced. But in a sense, in terms of like jobs and friendships and social media, there's always going to be someone or something that could replace you. And it's almost like getting over like the fear of like, well, if I step back from working so much, there's going to be someone that replaces me. But if that makes me happier, then so be it. Like, it's so hard to like take a step back and say, like, well, like, yeah, I can be replaced. Like, that is kind of a scary thought. But it's also like, so what if I get replaced if I'm happy? If I'm not worried about like checking social media for like likes or comments or engagement, if I'm not constantly worried about always doing my best like at a job but solely show up because it makes me happy, then that's where you really find and seek like that self validation rather than needing like praise and approval from others. And it's like it's such a hard mindset, and it's definitely taken me a very long time to get there, and some days are definitely a lot more challenging than others. But just also realizing that like while you are so irreplaceable and unique, there's also a level of do what makes you happy and disappoint yourself last, because in the end, if we're just constantly trying to like satisfy and get validated by others, like what about like ourselves and like what we want in a sense. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then when you're trying to get it from other places, you forget why you started.
exactly. 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 I know there was a point in time where like I used to check when my book first came out, I would check the book sales in the first few months, like was doing really well. And then there was a little dip down. And then I went to the phase of like, all right, so here I am. I wrote this book sharing my story. I know other people who have written books and shared their stories, and they've been more successful than I am. And then I think like, no, you know what? I'm not going to give myself like reassurance, but looking at the facts, like I chose to self-publish. I wrote about something that a lot of people are anxious to talk about. And the fact is I'm successful in that I did it. I wrote it, I published it, and the book sales and where it goes doesn't necessarily matter. If it helps one person, that's what matters. And it also helped myself to release it and put it out there. So now I never even check the book sales, which I might want to, but I used to have a tab and I go on and refresh all the time. And then I was like, this is literally making me miserable because there'd be like 2 days where I wouldn't get a sale. And then I'd be like, God, I suck. And then I would be like, you know what? No, like I published a book, and that is the success right there.
Yeah, and everything else
Did
is
it.
bonus. Everything else is.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Hmm. Exactly. I think it definitely like takes a little bit to get to more of like that aha moment of like, okay, I get it. Success is so much different than sales, money, and fame on social media. But in the end, it's like if you want to like be someone that makes an impact, but also just be happy with yourself, there is not going to be any instant gratification. There's not going to be any sort of like right away like fame and fortune. It's just so much more than that. And in like 10 years, the current like TikTok or Instagram stars, like that's all they're going to be known for. So it, and then that's all they're going to think of themselves as. So if you want to not fall into like that trap of validation. You almost need to recognize and like honor what you do for yourself, but almost like not even like think about in a sense what other people are or are not saying or doing.
Yeah. Wouldn't you rather have like long-term success anyway?
100%. 100%. For sure.
Because I often, sometimes I'm like, oh, why don't I have more views? And it's like, how boring would it be if right away you got them all?
Right? I think it takes, I always say this in my treadmill classes where it's like it is so much more about the process than the outcome. If you go through the process and you get beaten down, you're constantly needing to climb up mountains, but you keep pushing through and then you get there, that's everything. And the outcome doesn't even matter because you've had all this experience. If you instantly get it, you're like, all right, what's the next thing? But it's also like by pushing through and feeling like failure at times, feeling all the emotions that come with it, it makes like that end so much more like worth it. And I also truly believe that like if you can see something happening in your head, you're going to get there. You just need to put in the work and believe in yourself and recognize that even if people aren't telling you every single day you've got this, as long as you tell yourself you've got this, you will get there. If you can see it happening, it's going to happen. It just takes hard work and you shouldn't give up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I remember I used to, in swimming, I would have these unrealistic goals for like times
Mm-hmm.
and placing
Mm-hmm.
and things. And I would only focus on those. So I would ignore the fact that like season bests were happening or, you know, I'd be holding a good time or pace in practice. I was in great shape. I ignored all of that if I didn't get that unrealistic goal, which I never did. Um, and
Yeah.
then so it kind of left a bittersweet taste in my mouth when I retired. And then now looking back, it's like, man, like that process was so fun.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Man, yeah, it's hard to not have tunnel vision.
For sure. For sure. I honestly need to remind myself to not have tunnel vision multiple times a day, for being so honest.
Yeah, no, I got caught with it.
Multiple times a day.
I got caught with it like a month ago,
Yeah.
or not a month, but like December 31st, I hit 1,000 followers on my IG.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! And I remember that had been a goal of mine when I started to get it in under a year or something. But by
Mm-hmm.
the time that time had happened, my goal got bigger. And so when people were like, people called me and they're like, "Hey man, congrats! Like 1,000, that's a lot of people." And I was like, "It doesn't matter. Like that's not my goal." And they're like, "You don't even want to celebrate?" I'm like, "I'll make a post." But then it's like
Yeah.
you catch yourself. You're like, "Oh wait, like I'm never gonna be happy with that kind of mentality."
Totally. Totally. Yeah, for sure. I know I totally believe in like positively manifesting things, but also not only consistently positively manifesting things, but not falling into any traps and appreciating like small milestones. Because in the end, the finish line is the finish line. Why would you want it to end?
No, you don't.
Yeah. Anytime I run a marathon, I always like start and I'm like, oh, I can't wait till I get to the finish line. And then like at mile 25, I'm like, oh my God, it's coming up. I need to like, I can't. Then it's going to be over. So
So you start running backwards.
totally. Yeah. That.
I wanted to end this episode on the third and final blog post that I wanted to talk about
Mhm.
because by the time this comes out, it won't be halfway through the year. There'll be like 2 months left until halfway. But you have a blog post talking about why New Year's resolutions are a setup to fail model. And by halfway point, a lot of us are going to fail our New Year's resolutions. So how can we make it so that our resolutions don't follow this pattern and actually uh, help us motivate ourselves to become the best we can be?
Totally. So this is something that I like, I see it happen at the gym. I see it happen with students. I see it happen with myself. I see it happen with friends. And I think that, well, the premise of a New Year's resolution is great. It's just not attainable because you're setting one goal and expecting it to happen by the end of the year. And you're not able to measure it. And there's no true like benchmarks. So something that I do, especially in the education field, is like you set one annual goal and then you set like small achievable goals throughout the year, but you constantly are checking in on those goals. And if like, say your goal is to go to the gym every single day for the whole year. First of all, you need a new goal because you shouldn't be going to the gym every single day for the whole year. Like that's not good for your body. So then you kind of reflect, you're like, okay, let me make a goal that's a little bit more attainable. Maybe it's like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. Still a big goal, but measurable and you can attain for a year. From there, you think about like small little benchmark goals, like your quarter goals, like where you want to be in March, where you want to be June. I'm not good in math. So every 3 months, basically 12 divided by 4, I do know that's 3. So those quarter 3-month goals from January. Yes. So from there, you want to think about like little benchmarks and things that you should be making progress towards. So if you're finding that by like month 2, you're really only going to the gym 4 times a week, you then adjust your goal. Goals are like this thing where I feel like it's like a be all end all, but like in education, goals slide around all the time. And you start off, and if you find like, you know what, I'm not meeting that goal, I'm seeing success, I need to dial it back or maybe scale it up a little bit, you adjust it from there and you just monitor what your progress is. And in the end goal is not usually the same as what you started off with in terms of what you had in your head for the goal, but you're still working to make some sort of progress. So tracking some sort of progress. So if you're setting a goal in terms of like we've been talking about social media, if you're thinking like, okay, by April, I want to have 10K followers and it's March 15th and you're like, I only have 5,000. You don't think, okay, I failed. It's like, okay, I made connections. How can I dial it back and maybe make even more narrower connections with people that are interested in my content? Like, how can I change and shift my goals so that it is satisfying to me and it also is something that I can monitor my progress on? For OCD, I always used to make goals at the beginning of the year that I would never have any like intrusive thoughts. One year I said I set a goal I wasn't going to cry when I was 17, and I like cried on January 2nd. So I was like, oh God, my goal's ruined. I'm done for the year. But then it's also like, if you are thinking like, okay, I'm going to set a goal for OCD, like I'm not gonna have any intrusive thoughts, like you're setting yourself up to fail because that's not possible with the way like the brain works. Everyone, regardless if you have OCD, have intrusive thoughts all the time. But what you can set is a goal like, okay, my goal is going to be if I get any sort of intrusive thoughts or fall into like an OCD obsession or compulsion, 7 times out of 10, I am going to work to get myself out of it and use the tools. So then you have like the little wiggle room of like, all right, some days I'm not going to get there and that's fine. But the days that you do, it's like, okay, that's like a little small victory. So it's just about like setting and monitoring the goals to make progress within the year rather than at the end of the year. Because at the end of the year, if your goal is to like lose 15 pounds and you get to the end of the year and you've lost 15 pounds, but you were miserable doing it, you look back and all you remember for the year is like being miserable trying to like lose weight or not have intrusive thoughts or gain more followers. But if you focus on like small little goals, then you enjoy the process and you actually see results and success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of mentioned it too, where like if you have an unrealistic goal and like let's say I want to go to the gym every day, like you mentioned, that's stupid. But if you want to go to the gym every day and you miss one day, then you get hard on yourself for missing that day, and then you miss 2 days, and then it just kind of gets
Yep.
to a point where you don't go anymore.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So small, achievable, attainable goals that then build on bigger goals. We do it for kids. I honestly think kids and what they do in terms of like socialization, play, and just like these small attainable goals and just like the little like golden nuggets they say and the way they view life is just so important. And I think it's good to almost like dial it back as either young adults, or even like teens, and recognize like that process and why like elementary schoolers have so much fun.
Yeah, you can learn a thing or two from kids. We should all learn a thing or two from kids. I think we take life way too seriously.
Totally. 100%. 100% for sure.
So where can my viewers find you?
They can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle, I actually don't like. So my Instagram handle is DSK8154. My field hockey number is 81. 54 is like my go-to number. Then DSK is my initials. I've thought about changing my Instagram handle, but my Instagram handle's in my book. So then I need to go and redo the printing. So then it's just going to stay that way because it's meaningful to me. So DSK8154. And then that page kind of just connects to like the blog and my book site on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble. And then just kind of everything from there. I'm a lot better at answering Instagram DMs and then emails using the contact button than text. It's actually funny. Like sometimes people that want to get in touch with me, like if I don't answer my text, like they like call me through Instagram. I'm like, whoa, what's happening? And they're like, we knew you'd answer on here. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So yeah. So yes.
That's so funny. I'll put that link down below. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. This was great. Totally made my Saturday. So thank you so much.
Oh, wow. What an honor. Thank you. And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, it'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.